The sign was hand-lettered on a piece of cardboard propped against a gas station trash can, and it said, "Pregnant dog free" or "Best offer." And beneath that, in smaller letters that suggested the person who wrote them had lost some conviction partway through. $12 if you can. The dog was beside it, tied to the trash can with a bungee cord. She was a German Shepherd, and she was very pregnant. And she was sitting in the slush at the edge of the Exxon parking lot in Sheridan, Wyoming, in early March. And she was looking at the cars that pulled in and out of the lot with the particular attention of an animal who has accepted that something is being decided about her and has chosen, in the meantime, to remain dignified about it. Her coat was damp. The cardboard was getting wet at the corners. She had been there long enough that the slush under her had compressed into a shallow bowl. Garrett Hale pulled in to get coffee. He saw the dog before he saw the sign. He saw the dog the way he saw most things, immediately and completely, taking in the condition of her coat and the roundness of her belly and the quality of her stillness. The particular kind of stillness that is not calm but its closest neighbor. The stillness of an animal doing the work of remaining composed in a situation it did not choose. He read the sign. He read it twice. He stood there for a moment in the cold with his truck door open and the engine running. He went inside and bought the coffee. He came back out. The dog was looking at him. She had been looking at the door the entire time he was inside. The woman behind the register had watched it happen and mentioned it to him when he paid. The way people mention things they have found privately affecting but will only acknowledge to a stranger. He stood at the tailgate and drank half the coffee. The dog did not look away. He went to the trash can. He untied the bungee cord. He had $12 in his wallet in a fold of 3/4, and he tucked them under the corner of the cardboard where whoever had written the sign would find them. Because the sign said $12 if you can, and he could. He opened the passenger door of the truck. The dog looked at the seat, looked at him, and got in with the careful, dignified effort of a heavily pregnant animal that is not going to ask for help with the step, but accepts it when he puts his hand under her hindquarters to assist. He drove home. He had no idea what he was doing. He understood this clearly and did not find it disqualifying. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. If this story is reaching you tonight, please subscribe and stay with us all the way to the end. What happened in the weeks after that March morning in a Wyoming gas station parking lot is something Garrett Hale will spend the rest of his life trying to adequately explain. Garrett Hale was 42 years old and had the particular quality of stillness that belongs to men who have spent years in environments where unnecessary movement draws fire. He was 6 feet even and 210 pounds, broad through the chest and shoulders, with close-cropped dark blonde hair going gray at the temples and a jaw that carried several days of stubble he tracked imprecisely. His hands were large and had a scar across the right knuckles from a compound clearance in Fallujah in 2006 that had healed cleanly and that he no longer thought about. His eyes were a steady, pale green that people described, without quite knowing why, as careful, not suspicious, not cold. Careful. In the way that a man who has been responsible for other people's lives for long enough becomes careful about everything, including the small things, because he has learned that the small things are often the thing. He had been a senior chief petty officer with SEAL Team 5, 8 deployments over 14 years, Ramadi, the Korengal Valley, 3 rotations in Afghanistan across different commands, a maritime interdiction assignment in the Gulf of Aden, and 2 classified Joint Task Force deployments he had signed documentation agreeing to not discuss. He had come home from the last one in 2019 with a right shoulder that had been rebuilt twice and would never be rebuilt to its original specification, and a DD-214 that he had folded and put in a filing cabinet and had not looked at since, because looking at it required thinking about it, and he was not ready to think about it. He had bought 3 acres outside Sheridan with most of his savings, put up a 1-bedroom house with a covered porch and a propane stove and a view of the Bighorn Mountains that on clear mornings made the kind of argument for the existence of God that no one who has seen it can fully dismiss. He had a truck and a woodpile, and a neighbor named Earl Matson 2 miles east, who had chickens and a habit of waving from his tractor. He had a phone he checked less than he should and more than he wanted to. He was not unhappy. He had been unhappy before. In the transition year after he separated from the Navy, in the 6 months when the shoulder rehabilitation had required him to be sedentary in ways that the body of a man like Garrett Hale does not tolerate easily. In the long evenings of the first winter on the property, when the silence of the house had a quality he was not prepared for. The way silence after years of operational noise is its own sound, specific and hard to ignore. He had moved through those periods the way he had moved through difficult things in the field. By continuing to move, by remaining functional, by refusing to let the difficulty become the definition of the situation. By March of this particular year, he had reached something he might have called equilibrium, if pressed. He cooked his own food. He maintained the property. He read in the evenings, history, mostly, military history and the history before it. Because understanding the long narrative of what human beings had done to each other and occasionally for each other was, for Garrett, a way of contextualizing his own small place in it. He drove into Sheridan twice a week. He went to church on alternate Sundays, not because he had made a formal recommitment to faith, but because the particular silence of the church in the morning, with the mountains visible through the east window, was the kind of silence that had content, and he preferred it to the other kind. He was, in the specific and technical sense, alone. He had accepted this as the current condition without deciding it was the permanent one. The dog rode with her chin on the armrest between the seats and her amber eyes tracking the road with the systematic attention of a navigator who has taken a professional interest in the route. She did not whine, she did not shift. She breathed slowly and steadily, and with a depth that Garrett found. Before he could articulate why, settling, he had a hand on the armrest, and her chin was on his hand by the time they turned off the county road onto the gravel track to his property. And he did not move the hand. He did not know her history. He would piece it together over the weeks that followed from the evidence of her body and her behavior. The way she flinched briefly at raised voices but not at raised hands, suggesting the voice was the thing she'd learned to fear. The scar along her left ear that was well healed and old. The condition of her paw pads, worn in ways that suggested she had been working or walking on hard surfaces for a sustained period. The way she assessed new spaces by moving through the perimeter first, methodically, before settling at the center, which was a behavior Garrett recognized from a different context and found remarkable to watch in a dog. He did not know who had bred her or whether she had worked. He knew she was a German Shepherd, and she was pregnant, and someone had tied her to a gas station trash can with a bungee cord and written a sign that asked $12 for her. And he knew that whatever she had been before that morning, she was now his, and he was hers, and those two facts organized everything that followed. He named her March for the month, because he had been in the Navy long enough to believe in the significance of the date on which a thing begins. He called a veterinarian in Sheridan named Dr. Paula Okafor from his porch that afternoon and described the situation with military brevity. German Shepherd, pregnant, unknown gestation stage, acquired this morning. No prior records. Current condition stable. Dr. Okafor told him to bring her in the next morning. He said he would. He did. Dr. Okafor examined March with the efficient, unsentimental thoroughness of a woman who had been a large animal vet before moving to small animal practice, and who brought to every examination the attitude that the animal's well-being was the only relevant variable. She told Garrett that March was approximately 6 weeks into gestation. That she was malnourished relative to where she should be at this stage, but not critically so. That she had been pregnant before based on physical evidence, and that she was otherwise structurally sound and had what Okafor described, looking up from the table with the precision of someone choosing a specific word for a specific reason as a good constitution. "She's tough," Okafor said. "I know," Garrett said. He had known since the parking lot. Okafor gave him a diet and supplement protocol and a list of what to watch for in the final weeks and a recommendation for a whelping box configuration that Garrett built the following Saturday from plywood and insulation material with the methodical precision of a man who has built observation posts in forward operating bases and knows that shelter construction, at its core, is about one thing: keeping what is inside alive. He put the whelping box in the corner of the living room, nearest the propane stove, because the heat distribution in that corner was the most consistent, and because from that position March could see both the front door and the window that faced the mountains, which seemed, from observing her choices in the house during the preceding weeks, to be the two sight lines she considered relevant. She had been a SEAL in her way. He thought this sometimes, watching her move through the property on their morning walks. The systematic clearing of the perimeter, the preference for elevated positions when she rested outside, the specific alertness when a vehicle turned onto the gravel road, not panic, not aggression, information gathering. Whatever she had been before the parking lot, someone had trained her, or she had trained herself, or both. It didn't matter which. The result was the same. The puppies arrived on a Tuesday night in the second week of April, 4 weeks earlier than the window Okafor had given him. Garrett was awake and had been awake for 36 hours with a low-grade intuition that the timeline had compressed, because March had spent the last 2 days reorganizing the whelping box with an attention to detail that matched his own. And because she had begun eating less in a way that his research told him was normal, but that his instincts told him was preparatory. He was in the living room with a book he wasn't reading when she went into labor, and he called Okafor at 11:15, and she walked him through it on the phone, quietly and completely, asking the right questions and telling him what each answer meant. And at 1:40 in the morning, there were 7 German Shepherd puppies alive in the whelping box, which Okafor told him was a substantial litter and that March was doing magnificently. And he agreed. He sat on the floor beside the box with his back against the couch and March's head on his knee and watched the puppies for a long time in the propane stove's warmth and the quiet of the house and the dark of the Wyoming night outside the window. He was not a man who cried easily or often. He sat there with March's head on his knee and his hand in the thick fur along her neck, and he felt something shift in the house that he did not have a clean word for. Something that had to do with the specific quality of being needed and of need being met, and he let himself feel it without trying to name it more precisely, because some things resist precision and are truer for it. He called Okafor in the morning and reported that all 7 were nursing and March was eating. Okafor told him that was exactly what she would have expected to hear, and that she would be out in 2 days for a follow-up visit, and that he had done good work. "She did the work," Garrett said. "You kept her alive before she could," Okafor said. There had been a man who called about the puppies in the 5th week. He had seen the listing Garrett had posted. Straightforward, no photographs of the whelping box because that had seemed like an intrusion, just a description and a contact number, and he had driven out from Sheridan on a Wednesday afternoon in a truck that was clean and expensive, and had called ahead exactly when he said he would, which Garrett noted. His name was Kelton Pruitt, and he was 49, and he managed commercial properties in the county, and he wanted a dog for his property, he said, for security. And he had done his research. German Shepherd was the right breed. He understood the commitment. He was articulate and organized, and had brought a check already filled out for the asking price. Garrett watched him interact with the puppies for 12 minutes. Pruitt handled them with the efficiency of a man who has decided he wants something and is now processing the acquisition. He did not sit on the floor. He assessed the two largest males from a standing position, asked about the litter's lineage, which Garrett could not fully supply, and said he preferred the larger of the two because size mattered for deterrence purposes. Garrett told him the puppies were spoken for. Pruitt looked at the living room, at the 7 puppies in the whelping box, at the check in his own hand. All of them? All of them, Garrett said. Pruitt left without making a scene about it, which Garrett respected at the level of minimum credit due. He stood in his driveway after the truck was gone and looked at the mountains for a while. Then he went inside and sat on the floor with the puppies and thought about what he had just decided, and decided it had been the right call, and moved on. He found homes for 5 of the 7 puppies over the following 8 weeks through a process he conducted with the same thoroughness he would have brought to vetting personnel for an operation. He met every family. He visited 2 of their homes. He turned down one otherwise qualified applicant because the man's voice had a quality when he spoke to the puppy directly that Garrett did not like, which he was not able to articulate more specifically than that, and which he did not feel required further articulation. The puppies went to a retired schoolteacher, a ranching family with 3 children, a county deputy whose previous K-9 had died the prior year, a couple in their 60s whose last child had left home in January, and a 10-year-old girl in Dayton whose mother had brought her to meet the litter on a Saturday, and who had sat in the middle of the living room floor for 45 minutes being visited by all 7 puppies in rotation, with the composure of a child who understood that this was a serious occasion. 2 of the 7 stayed. March had decided this. She had decided it in the way that animals make certain decisions, not with deliberation, but with a completeness that does not invite revision. The 2 who stayed were a male and a female, the largest and the smallest of the litter respectively, and they had been March's particular concern since the first night, always sleeping closest to her, always nursed first, always the 2 she oriented toward when she looked up from the box. Garrett had watched this for 6 weeks and understood it as information. He had not argued with it. He named the male after a man from his platoon in Ramadi who had died in the spring of 2006, and who had been the kind of person who makes the people around him better without knowing he is doing it, and whose name deserved to be spoken aloud in a good house. He named the female 12 for the dollars on the cardboard. By September, the 3 of them had established a routine that Garrett had not planned and could not have planned. The kind of routine that assembles itself when a life has the right components and enough time. Morning walks on the property, March taking the lead, and the 2 younger dogs learning the perimeter from her, with the specific attentiveness of students who understand that the lesson is practical. Evenings on the porch, March at Garrett's left, the 2 dogs at the steps, the mountains going from gold to gray to dark as the light left. Garrett reading. The propane stove muttering, the specific quiet of a house that has been filled. Earl Matson came by in October with a jar of his wife's apple butter and stood on the porch and looked at the 3 dogs arranged in their positions and said, with the laconic certainty of a man who says only what he means, "That's a good house now." "Yeah," Garrett said. "It is." Dr. Okafor came for a wellness check in November and sat with her coffee on the porch and watched March make her deliberate circuit of the yard and said what she'd been thinking since April. She was a working dog. Somebody trained her and then didn't keep her. "I know," Garrett said. She found the right place. He looked at the mountains. The snow had come to the high country, and the peaks were white above the timberline, and the morning was cold and still and completely clear. "We both did," he said. March came back from the yard and sat at his feet and pressed her head against his knee, not asking for anything, simply placing herself at the point of contact between herself and the person she had chosen, the way a trained dog does when the handler is in the kind of quiet that is not emptiness, but its resolution. Her amber eyes were soft and complete. The two younger dogs came up the porch steps and settled at either side of Garrett's chair, and the house behind them held the warmth of the propane stove and the smell of the coffee, and the particular inhabited quality of a place that is no longer waiting to become something. It had become it. Sometime in the 8 months between a gas station parking lot and a Wyoming November morning, without announcement, it had become it. Sometimes miracles arrive at gas station parking lots, tied to trash cans with bungee cords, with a cardboard sign that asks $12 if you can. God does not always send what we are looking for. He sends what we actually need, and He sends it in the form it can arrive in, wet from the slush, pregnant with what it is carrying, looking at us from across a parking lot with an amber directness that asks only whether we are capable of saying yes. Garrett Hale was not looking for a dog. He was not looking for a family, or a reason to come home from the porch, or the specific warmth of being needed by something that cannot use words to tell you so. He stopped for coffee. He came out. He saw a dog in the slush and a hand-lettered sign. And he did the simple, necessary thing. And the simple, necessary thing became, in the way that such things do when they are truly necessary, everything. Every man who has carried a great weight through difficult years and come out the other side deserves a morning like this one. Clear sky, cold air, 3 dogs on a porch, mountains in the distance, the sense that the hardest part is behind him and what is here now is worth staying for. May we all be paying enough attention when $12 and one decision stand between us and that morning. If this story moved you, share it today with someone who needs to be reminded that the best things in life still arrive without warning, in the most ordinary places, to people who are simply willing to stop. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from, and if you have ever made a small decision that turned out to be the biggest one you ever made. We want to hear it. Your story matters to us, and it may matter to someone else even more. If you believe in courage, loyalty, and the grace that comes to people who are quietly doing their best, please subscribe to the channel and stay for the next story. May God bless you, protect your family, and give you the eyes to see what is sitting at the edge of your light, waiting for you to open the door.